Welcome to Screens of the Stone Age, the podcast where scientists review movies about prehistoric people. My name is Josh Lindell. I'm a grad student studying Neanderthal teeth, and I'm here with...
I'm Dr. Kimberly Plump. I am a bioarchaeologist. I study the human skeleton, health and disease, and evolution.
And I'm Dr. Ross Barnett, a paleogeneticist focusing mainly on Ice Age cats.
And before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to tell you about our new sponsor, Paleo Shakes. The first and only 100% raw meat pre-workout smoothie, so you can get ripped just like our caveman ancestors did. That's a joke. We don't have any sponsors. If you're a longtime listener, you will know that we don't have any advertisements. We, in fact, don't make any money on this podcast. And I don't think we really have any plan to ever do that. So if you want to support us, what you can do is give us a review on Apple Podcasts, give us a thumbs up on YouTube, share our podcast episodes on social media so that people can find out about us, and send us an email or send us a message on social media to let us know what you think about the podcast. Sorry for the deception up front, but we never do a call to action, and I thought that would be a fun way to do it. So today's episode is about a sitcom called Cavemen. We watched the first episode of season 1, which is called Her Embarrassed of Caveman, I think is the title of the episode. Mm. Now I have to ask you, are you familiar with this show and the context surrounding it?
I just remember the commercials, but I didn't know there was a show.
Well, being in the old world, I only find out about it through the kind of websites that I read and things like that. So I had heard about the Geico Cavemen commercials. They were like a big thing. And I had heard that it spun off into a sitcom. And then I had also heard that that sitcom was absolutely terrible. And that was the extent of my knowledge until today.
Yeah.
Well, I do think that this show would make absolutely no sense if you weren't familiar with the commercials. So luckily we're all familiar. In case anybody isn't familiar, the commercials are actually really great. Mm-hmm. And they started with one commercial. It's like a 15-second commercial back in, I think, 2004, where it's a commercial for Geico car insurance. And they have just like sort of a regular looking presenter on screen, and he's describing Geico car insurance, and he says it's so easy, even a caveman can do it. And then you hear a commotion and the camera turns, and the boom mic operator is a caveman who's offended by that, and he walks off set. It's a really good commercial.
Yeah.
And it spawned like a whole cinematic universe of these cavemen living in modern society where in every commercial, a caveman comes across this commercial and is offended by it. And then they sort of develop this like whole character arc amongst these cavemen, trying to deal with this prejudice that they're experiencing living in modern human society, which is hilarious for a commercial. And then they turned it into a sitcom, and then we watched the first episode, and we're going to talk about that. So yeah. Who wants to summarize this episode?
I can do it. I don't remember any of their names, though.
I've got the names. I can help you with that. It's Nick and Joel and Andy.
Wasn't there 4 of them? Oh, no, I guess there's 3.
There is a 4th friend that they meet out at the club or something like that.
The squash playing dude.
Right. So there's 3 cavemen that live in an apartment together. They're friends, frenemies, whatever. 2 are brothers, actually. Joel and
Andy.
Andy are brothers. And then Nick's kind of an asshole. And they live in a really nice apartment, and they're just living regular lives. Nick is doing his dissertation. We don't know on what, but that's probably the funniest part of the show is his comments on the dissertation.
Yeah, and it also explains why he's a total asshole.
Yeah.
Just to interrupt you there, I relate so hard to Nick. I'm also in my 5th year of my PhD. I have done my hair today for a visual joke that people can't see on our audio podcast. I look just like him. I actually cut my hair last week, so it's about the same length. I got the same beard, same glasses.
Yeah, you do.
In a later episode, he gives the title of his dissertation, and it's some sort of like complicated nonsense, but it seems to be something in like anthropology or sociology. So I relate very heavily to Nick.
The best thing was they were said something like, he was like, "Oh, I need to do some writing," and they're like, "You haven't written anything in a year." And he's like, "Not 90% of a dissertation is conceptualizing. All the work is happening in here."
That's true, though, because today is
I know it
Saturday.
is.
On Monday of this week, I didn't work on my dissertation because we were recording our last episode with Dr. Kinkella. Friday of this week, I didn't work on my dissertation because I was doing a whole bunch of gardening outside. So I worked 3 days this week on my dissertation.
But you were conceptualizing the whole time.
Yeah.
I'm always conceptualizing.
Yeah.
It's always in the back of my head, stressing me out constantly.
Thinking is part of the job.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also online poker playing, which he also does. That's also part of the It's all part of the process.
That's what I would have done in 2007.
So then he's sitting on the couch playing poker and watching TV, and then someone makes a noise, and he's like, "I'm trying to work."
We've all been there.
Yeah. Anyway, so I think the main story is like we're getting to know them, getting to know what life is like for them, and it seems like the society, like again, it's the parallel between with racism. So there seems to be Homo sapiens and Neanderthals live together, live amongst themselves and everything, but there seems to be some kind of stigma. Maybe some people see stigma with a Homo sapiens and a Neanderthal dating, things like that. So there is, and like one of the realtors, a realtor comes in and she's a little bit, keeps mistaking Joel for Nick, and then says that maybe they should put like a colored ribbon in their hair so that she can tell them apart. Like, so there is some like social commentary on racism, right? Anyway, so the main thing is that Joel has this new girlfriend, but he won't tell her the guys anything about her, so they think that she must be really horrible or something, and he's hiding her, or that she's made up. The other guy, not Joel's brother, I forgot his name again.
Andy.
He's in love with his ex, Susan, and so he keeps phoning her and trying to get her back, and it's kind of the thing where Nick and Joel are trying to stop him from continuously phoning his ex and moping over her. And then, so the main storyline is that Joel has this girlfriend and he sells furniture to a furniture store, and she only ever comes to the furniture store and then they make out on the furniture. But they're still keeping their relationship a secret from their respective like people in their lives. And then the other sideline story is that Andy has trying to get over his girlfriend. He's annoying Nick by being home and whining and stuff. And Nick's just kind of generally an asshole. And then he finds out that Andy actually has a lot of money for some reason, a lot of cash. So then Nick wants to take Andy out so that they can go and spend all their cash. So they buy a Wii, which would have been new at that time, go out for drinks, they buy a ton of stuff. And so they're just kind of doing their regular sitcom-y, jokey things around. And then Joel's getting more and more insecure about this idea that he might be being hidden by his girlfriend, that she might be embarrassed by him. And so he finally tries to make it so that the two friend groups will meet, but she says she's busy, she's having a girls' night, guys can't come. He gets really insecure about that. So then him and his friends crash the girls' night, which is never a good idea. And he kind of accuses her of hiding him and being embarrassed of him because he's a Neanderthal, and maybe she doesn't want her friends to know she's dating Neanderthal. But then it turns out that she actually dates only Neanderthals. So her friends are well aware that she dates Neanderthals. And then it's more that her relationships never last. And so she wanted to make sure they were serious before she introduced her to her friends, which is fair. And then at the end of the show, it becomes, so when Joel is explaining this to Nick, Nick then plants the seed of insecurity in Joel again, saying like, "Oh, so you're just a fetish boyfriend." Right. And I think that's about it.
Yeah, it ends really abruptly, doesn't it? It doesn't seem to have like an
it's
actual...
almost like it got cut off. Yeah, it's almost like YouTube got cut off.
There are we watched this on YouTube. The whole series is on YouTube, by the way, but There's a couple of different versions of the first episode uploaded, and they all end the same way. So it cuts off before the credits, but I don't think it actually cuts off any of the show. I think it probably cut abruptly to credits at that sort of joke.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't terrible. I was kind of geared up for something that would be just the worst. But I actually laughed out loud at one point. Do either of you want to make a guess of what I laughed out loud at? One particular phrase.
Was it keep your penis in your genus?
Top points to Josh. Yeah, that made me laugh out loud. So,
Yeah.
I totally wasn't expecting that. That made me laugh.
Which doesn't make sense because they're Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthal, the same genus.
Yeah.
Okay,
funny.
So we can start with the nitpicking. Cavemen and Homo sapiens are the same genus. But I think that's it that we can nitpick because this show, like most of the movies we watch, you can tell that they were inspired by some facts. This was inspired by a commercial, and they didn't do any research into cavemen at all. There is no references to anything really cavemen except for the prosthetics that they wear, and there is a painting of the Lascaux horse on the wall in their apartment, and I think that is it that we could comment on in this entire episode. There is no real life inspiration supporting this other than a commercial.
Yeah.
The painting looked really good on the wall too. I was like, that's a really good design choice. I would do that.
Yeah. Do you think they got it at IKEA, the kind of place that he's supposed to be working at, but they've given a kind of legal approved fake name to?
I think so, because all the names were like blog and lag and stuff, right?
I mean, yeah, it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't very good, and it kind of felt weird. The whole them kind of leading into the kind of prejudice against cave people, and then having it just be all entirely Caucasian people with prosthetics on. That felt like a little bit weird.
So the thing about the show is like, it's like widely recognized as a bad show. They made 12 episodes and it was canceled after 6. I was just listening to another podcast about it. Apparently it was canceled in the middle of the writer's strike.
Oh.
When they had 6 more episodes.
Wow.
So like they were
so bad.
They were like scrambling to find new episodes to put up, and they're like, we can't put this one though. We have 6 episodes, but we can't do this one. And another one of the reasons why you probably didn't think this was as bad as you were worried it would be is because there was an unaired pilot that sort of follows a similar structure to the first episode that we watched, which received really critical reviews from the people who watched it. So they retooled it into this episode, which is a much better episode. It's also kind of funny, and it's like the acting is competent. Nick Kroll, I think this was Nick Kroll's first big TV show role.
Okay.
And I love Nick Kroll.
Yeah, me too.
Most recently of Big Mouth. I think I love Big Mouth.
Yeah,
so
same.
But in the...
He's also recently been in What They Do in the Shadows. He's really funny in that as well.
But the unaired pilot, which you didn't see, is much worse. The difference in that one is it sort of introduces the same way, but the girlfriend that he has in this episode, she's his fiance in the pilot episode. And the premise is that he's meeting her family, and they're going to this fancy country club party, and he wants to invite his friends, his brother and his roommate as well, for like moral support, I guess, because he's worried that she is embarrassed to introduce her Neanderthal fiance to her parents. And the racist overtones are like really prominent in that episode. In the series, it's set in San Diego, but in that one, it's set in Georgia. And they go to this country club party, and it's the idea of racism is like front and center. Everybody has these stereotypes about these cavemen, like all the people at this country club question whether they're supposed to be there. They think they're like the gardeners or things like that, right? And he's trying to make a good impression to her father, but he goes through some like shenanigans and accidentally ends up ripping his shirt and holding a torch somehow. like, falling into the stereotype, and it was really rough. So this aired first episode is much better than the pilot. I guess you guys didn't watch any more of the episodes after that?
God, no.
No.
So,
Sorry, I was just going to say it's kind of your typical boring early 2000s sitcom.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
what I think kind of gave me the ick was that it kind of, when they kind of lean into the prejudice angle, that they're making fun of the prejudice rather than making fun of the people that are prejudicial. It's like, it's playing racism for laughs rather than, punching up and trying to make fun of people who are racist, which would be the correct kind of way to play it, I would say.
Yeah. It's sort of framed as a satire, but it's really just a parody of racism.
Yeah.
So, like, there's not really a joke to it. I mean,
No.
the commercials had a great joke there, but, as a premise for an entire show, that's just not a premise for a show, right? You just can't have a show where people are racist against your main characters, and it's an obvious parody of the real racism that Black people experience in America.
And you're meant to laugh at it.
Yeah, it's like that's the thing that makes it uncomfortable and that makes everybody think it's one of the worst shows ever made. There's other things that happen throughout the series and partly in the unaired pilot that we can talk about for more context, because there's nothing else we can talk about in the actual episode we watched. But what species of caveman do you think they're supposed to be? Did they actually say it in the episode?
Not in the one we watched.
Oh no, I just assumed Neanderthal.
Yeah.
Well, they're definitely made up to look like they're Neanderthal because they have these heavy prosthetic brows, right?
Yeah.
But in the pilot, and I believe in later episodes as well, they self-identify as Cro-Magnon, which obviously doesn't make any sense.
No. And that makes the only good line they had about keeping your penis in your genus even less sensible.
Even less.
Yes.
They're not even a separate species, let alone a genus.
Yeah.
Well, but they refer to humans as sapiens, right? Like, oh, you're dating a sapien.
Yeah.
And so that's just a symptom of, like, literally no research into cavemen at all. The entire basis is a commercial, and everything is just based on stereotypes. So, I mean, we've talked about Cro-Magnon before. It's not a term that we really use that much in paleoanthropology, but it specifically refers to a site in France, which is a modern human site. So Cro-Magnons were modern human cavemen from Europe, which doesn't make any sense. And they don't look like Cro-Magnons because Cro-Magnons are just modern humans, right? They look identical to us.
Totally.
One of the things that happens in the pilot, which I think they cut for the rest of the series, but I'm not sure because I didn't watch the entire series, they have a slur term for the cavemen based on Cro-Magnon, and they call them maggers. I'm going to pronounce that very carefully.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
And so that's one of the things I believe they cut that from the rest of the series because people were very critical of that term.
Of course.
I mean, come on.
In particular, in the pilot, there's a scene where the cavemen are all together in the car, and Nick Kroll refers to them as maggers. And Joel's like, don't use that term, it's offensive. And he's like, I'm taking it back. And like, they're all white people. The actors are all white people, right? It's just super uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad they got rid of that.
Yeah.
That's not cool. I did quite like the bit in the first episode where they're where the real estate lady that's just there as like a sort of southern stereotype is asking them to keep their primal grunting down, and you don't know what's going on in their flat, and it turns out they're playing Wii boxing. That was also quite amusing. So 2007.
It is the jokes and even the cadence and everything. I think they would have done better incorporating some actual like Neanderthal stuff into it and making more like jokes out of the like transitioning between the lives, I think, right? Like, I don't know how they would have done it. I'm not a sitcom writer, but in the same way that like Encino Man did with the
Yeah.
With the bowl and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there should have been more little jokes incorporated into that. Things like that, yeah.
Yeah, the sort of premise of the show is that even though they're cavemen, they are culturally indistinguishable from Homo sapiens, right? They have no accents.
Mm-hmm.
They, apart from the Lascaux painting on their wall, they have no Neanderthal culture. They act and behave exactly like everybody else does.
And we should
so
point
they
out,
really have no problem assimilating, right?
Yeah, and the Lascaux is not a Neanderthal site. That's modern humans that made Lascaux as well.
But it would be safe to say that Lascaux was a Cro-Magnon site, right?
Yeah, I think so.
It's around the same time
same place.
Cro-Magnon, and the same place. They're both in France, yeah. So I mean, that, I guess that aligns. If they actually were Cro-Magnons, then that would be part of their cultural heritage. But yeah, it's like without the commercial, if you didn't know the commercial existed, it would just be impossible to understand this show. Why are there cavemen that are culturally indistinguishable from the other people just living amongst them? It just doesn't make any sense on its own.
Yeah.
One of the things we can talk about is the actual interbreeding between modern humans and, let's assume they're actually Neanderthals instead of Cro-Magnon. But this came out in 2007, and it wasn't until 2010 that we had the genetic confirmation that modern humans and Neanderthals had interbred. So at some point in prehistory, this is more or less an event that would have actually happened, where you had modern humans and Neanderthals in contact, and they would have actually been interbreeding, which is an interesting thing to think about on its own. That would make a cool show or a movie. I guess we did recently watch that movie, Out of Darkness, where you had the modern humans and Neanderthals interacting for the first time, except that they weren't mating in that one.
Maybe after the credits.
Well, the Neanderthals were all dead, so they'd have to find some more.
I'm just checking some of the dates. I think the first Neanderthal genome stuff came out in 2006.
Well, the draft sequence of the Neanderthal genome, like the complete draft sequence, was 2010. But that was the one that confirmed Neanderthal interbreeding, right? They didn't have any modern human. They didn't have evidence of Neanderthal genes in modern humans until that 2010 paper, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just looking at Green et al., which is from 2006, which is 1 million base pairs, but they don't.
It's the Green et al. 2010, where they.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess just to give us something to talk about, since that, we have found lots of evidence of interbreeding. So, like, before 2010, I feel like, because I was in my undergrad when that paper came out, and I feel like before that, there was a lot of skepticism that there could have been any interbreeding between modern humans and Neanderthals.
Yeah.
The only evidence before that was juvenile skeletons that looked like they had traits shared with Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. So people suggested they could be hybridization, hybrids of the two. But that was hotly debated and argued. So when I was in my undergrad, that was like a huge question and a debate, right? Arguing over what if a trait is important and what type of variation would be in each species.
And all the Neanderthal mitochondrial stuff that had been done from 97 onwards showed that there's no overlap between Neanderthal mitochondria and sapiens mitochondria, which was at the time quite strong, but also the only kind of genetic evidence for no interbreeding between Neanderthals and sapiens, though with the caveat that that's just one locus and it's only maternally inherited. So yeah, it wasn't definitive.
Yeah.
So can we, I haven't really thought about the mitochondrial DNA in a while, but can we extrapolate anything like social from that? Because if we don't have Neanderthal mitochondria in modern humans, and we don't have modern human mitochondrial DNA in Neanderthals, can that tell us that when there was interbreeding, it wasn't like real population mixing, but it was, women being impregnated, but then the child growing up in the society of the mother with no real crossing of cultural groups? Or can we not make that interpretation from that evidence?
I don't think, not securely anyway, because I mean it's just one locus, and the effective drifts are going to be huge. I think people have tried to say, for instance, that it might weakly suggest that there was some kind of issue between mating between, let's think how it would be, male Homo sapiens and female Neanderthals. Maybe their offspring were sterile, and that's why you don't get continuation of the Neanderthal mitochondrial line, whereas male Neanderthals with female Homo sapiens might have been more viable. I don't know, but I mean that would be one interpretation of the results, but not a very strongly supported one, I would say, because you're just dealing with one locus, which makes it quite difficult.
Mm-hmm.
But certainly there have been, like you say, there've been other interesting things that have come out since then. So like with the Denisovans and with the identification of bone from an F1 hybrids of a Denisovan and Neanderthal, is that right? Or is it Denisovan and a sapien?
Yeah. Denisovan and Neanderthal.
Yeah, so they've actually found a fragment of bone where the one parent was a Denisovan and one parent was a Neanderthal, which is, either vanishingly unlikely to have survived this long, or interbreeding was going on more often than we maybe imagined to leave that kind of evidence in the fossil record.
Mm-hmm. Not only to have survived this long, but for us to have found it.
Yeah.
Like, out of how many prehistoric human specimens have we actually got DNA from? Like, it's probably on the order of maybe dozens, right? Like, we don't have DNA from a lot of Pleistocene human bones.
No, I would say it's definitely under 100.
Yeah. And so to have one of those, a first generation hybrid with parents, like two parents of different species, would be so unlikely if that was like a rare occurrence. So that's really strong evidence that it probably happened all the time.
Yeah.
We also have lots of later generation hybrids between modern humans and Neanderthals. And the first one that was identified was from SotSA cave in Romania. And it's not a first generation hybrid, but it's like a fourth to sixth generation hybrid. So this individual had, whereas most people have like about 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA, this one had, I think, like 9% Neanderthal DNA. And so based on that, it's estimated that it had probably a Neanderthal great-great-grandparent, or a couple of generations more than that, like a great-great-great-great-grandparent.
Or could it be possible you have, more distant but on two different sides? So does it have to be? I should know the answer to this clearly, but instead of just having one quite recent Neanderthal ancestor, could it have had multiple Neanderthal ancestors further back? If you see what I mean.
Well, Ross, maybe you can speak to this a little more, but my understanding of the way they determine how distant the ancestors are, particularly in the case of Denny, the Denisovan Neanderthal first generation hybrid, is they look at how many contiguous Neanderthal or modern human or Denisovan segments there are.
Yeah.
So during meiosis, during the production of sex cells, the two pairs of the chromosome that you got from your mother and father recombine. They align and share part of each other. They like chop each other up and put them back together. So they mix and match your mother's and father's segments. But you get you get a long stretch of your father and a long stretch of your mother and then a long stretch of your father. And so in Denny, when they see it's 50% Neanderthal DNA, 50% Denisovan, and each chromosome has very, very long segments. But when Denny had children, those segments would have got chopped up more and more. So every generation, they get chopped up. So your segments are smaller and smaller. Yeah. And so I believe that in the SotSA and other European hybrids between Neanderthals and modern humans, they're looking at how contiguous those segments are. Because if it was, tiny little bits chopped up, like, thousands of little pieces intermixed between modern human and Neanderthal, that would reflect many generations down the line of recombination. But if the segments are longer and less chopped up, then that indicates a more recent ancestor.
Yeah, that's right. I think
that makes sense.
So, and again, you have to think about the kind of vanishing likelihoods of a fossil surviving from 45,000 years ago to the present day, and then B, for it to have been sampled for DNA, and C, for it to show evidence of recent generational interbreeding between different species. So yeah, like Josh was saying, we've only got under 100 guys that we've actually sampled for DNA, and we found at least 2 kind of recent hybridizing events, let alone the fact that our modern genomes have, if you're non-African, then you have a reasonable amount of Neanderthal DNA in there.
Yep.
Yeah, we could sort of summarize all the hybridization events that we know of. So we've got Denny, that first generation. We've got SotSA in Romania, which is a 4th to 6th generation. But even within Denny, the first generation Denisovan Neanderthal hybrid, there's evidence, I believe, that the Denisovan parent had very distant Neanderthal ancestry. Because within the Denisovan segments, there are very small and chopped up Neanderthal segments mixed into that. So that sort of indicates that the Denisovan parent had sort of many generations back a very distant Neanderthal ancestor. So even within that individual, we have 2 instances of hybridization. And in addition to the SotSA in Europe, we have more recently, I think, Bachokiro in somewhere in Eastern Europe. Also has evidence for sort of a recent 4 to 6 generations back hybrid. There's evidence of Denisovans interbreeding with modern humans based on the genetic signature of Denisovans found in modern human populations in particularly East Asia or like the South Pacific.
Yeah, Austronesian kind of groups.
There is evidence of a ghost lineage interbreeding with Denisovans. So within Denisovan DNA, there's signatures of something's DNA that we don't know what it is. And Ross, maybe you could speak to that, because this is a question that I'm not really sure about how to answer. How do we know that DNA came from something that wasn't Denisovans if we don't know what it was and we don't have DNA from it?
Good question. I don't know if I'm up to date enough in the literature to answer that very well, but I think to where they find a mismatch, possibly between the kind of what's the word I need? The coalescence. That's the word I'm looking for. So the coalescence dates between particular gene regions. If there's a big mismatch between those, that's how they do the kind of the dating of the divergences from the DNA. Is looking at when the kind of lineages coalesce, and that can be timed. But if they find that there's like mismatches between particular regions or something like that, then that would be evidence for ghost lineage, that you have 2 different timing events for introgression. I don't know if that makes very much sense.
I think so.
As I've always understood it, it's some sort of statistical magic. You take some numbers, you plug them into a software, it gives you a result.
That's it.
That you know how to interpret.
Pretty much. I've managed just to find an image somewhere in the bowels of my computer about all the different mixes. So you've got, Denisovans and Neanderthals, you've got Neanderthals and Homo sapiens, you've got Homo sapiens into ancestral Neanderthals. You've got the archaic lineage into the Denisovans, but also into the ancestors of the Denisovans and the Neanderthals. So yeah, it's very much a free-for-all, essentially, which I find quite reassuring. I like the idea that we made love, not war, in the distant past with all of our relatives. I think it's maybe not the question, not the answer that we often get from the films that we watch, is it? Really, it's all about the kind of primal and aggressive nature of humans from the distant past. But the evidence suggests that actually, at least some of the time, we must have got on reasonably well.
Yeah, maybe the flower children thing was on the right path.
Totally.
We got Caveman movie bingo hit on this show. We've got cavemen in the present day. That's one of the common things we see in our cavemen movies. I didn't see any other real cavemen movie bingo because there's nothing else about cavemen in this.
Cave art on the walls. I think that's
cave art on the walls
on modern walls.
Yeah.
Maybe just having Lascaux as a bingo square would be enough. What do we think about the prosthetics? Assuming that they're actually Neanderthals and not Cro-Magnons as they self-identify, what did you think about the prosthetics?
Not bad.
They're okay.
I think
If you had done more, you would have had trouble with them talking in their eyes and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What I think they did a good job in is making them look human, like making them look different, but not freakishly so. Like in the way that is often done to make them look scary or bestial or whatever. They made them look just like a different kind of human, and you could imagine that they wouldn't have had too much of a problem picking up chicks in IKEA or in the clubs or wherever. That the differences weren't so huge or so weird that it would cause problems.
Yep. I don't know why they all had to have the same length hair though.
Yeah.
Fashion.
I mean, I guess that's
they can't style their hair.
I guess that's the only real evidence of the caveman culture is that every caveman wears shoulder-length, shaggy hair that's unkempt with an unkempt beard as well.
There's maybe only one Neanderthal barber in the city.
You know what? That's another caveman movie bingo. Cavemen had unkempt hair. Cavemen couldn't groom, right?
True.
Yeah.
I guess the real answer to that is that if they cut their hair and shaved their face, it would be really hard to tell that they were cavemen, which is something that, like, when I teach Neanderthals to my intro classes, there's, throughout history, going back to like the 1930s, that people have noted that if you cleaned up a Neanderthal and dressed it in normal clothes and gave it a normal haircut, it wouldn't stand out on the subway is the description usually, right?
Yeah. Though, I mean, that I don't know, maybe that should make us worry a little bit about our observational skills. You have to also remember at the same time, people used to shave bears and put them in a dress and exhibit them at circuses as pig-faced ladies, and people would be like, oh yeah, it's a lady with a pig face, it's not a shaved bear.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the episode, but I believe this is actually a plot point in a later episode of the series where they again, it's an obvious parody of real race issues in America where they bring it up in the first episode too. There's the weatherman on the TV channel who is Neanderthal, who is much more cleaned up and wearing like a preppy sweater vest under a sports coat, right? And Nick criticizes him. I think he says like dance monkey dance or something like that. Like he's being domesticated by the modern humans, right?
Yeah.
Like I guess like they call that an Uncle Tom character when you have like the black character in like the plantation days who is like the one that adopts the white people's culture to try and fit in and gain advantage in that way, right? But I believe in a later episode there is a character that is a modern human, but Nick thinks is a caveman that has shaved. They actually have a slang term in the show. They call them shavers. He thinks that he has shaved and like cut his hair to try and pass as a modern human. And it turns out it's actually just a modern human with very robust features.
Well, I mean, that's interesting, I guess, from a paleoanthropological point of view, in that there is, like, it's quite difficult sometimes to tell early modern human skulls from late Neanderthals. Would that be right?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
There is kind of morphological overlap.
There's also, if you like follow forums like on Reddit or things like that, there's always people posting photos of modern humans with very robust features and being like, this guy must have like more Neanderthal ancestry than everybody else. I actually get a lot of these. I get a lot of direct messages on Reddit from people who have read my comments on Anthropology Subs asking me questions. And in particular, I can't remember the guy, but there's some actor or boxer or something who has really heavy features and really heavy brow ridges. And people are always like, this guy must have a lot of Neanderthal traits. And I'm like, you know what? He's got a heavy brow ridge, but that's not a distinctly Neanderthal trait, because modern humans contemporary with Neanderthals also had very heavy brow ridges.
Yeah.
And obviously modern humans living today could have very heavy brow ridges. And if you look at the traits that actually distinguish Neanderthals from modern humans, they don't have any of them. Maybe we could go over this, but like modern humans have a pointy chin, and no other humans had that. So a Neanderthal's chin just sort of slopes backwards. And that's the first thing to look for if you're looking at a skull, trying to identify what species it belongs to. If it has a chin that points forward, like a bony chin that points forward, it's 100% a modern human. There's no other case where any other human had a pointy chin, right?
Yeah. Is it Nikolai Valuev? Is that the boxer? Because he's like really tall and has very distinctive brow ridges, and I think I've seen comments 100%. As well.
100%.
Yeah. But you also have to remember as well that there are kind of sort of physiological things that can cause similar sort of issues. So like acromegaly, where you have overgrowth of pituitary hormones, which can cause massive kind of growth in hands and skull and things like that. So all these things are plastic. And I think it's pretty sus to accuse anyone of being a Neanderthal in the modern day. It usually is kind of slightly racist. Like people use it as a slur term, but it really kind of just shows their own ignorance.
The other thing to think about is allometric scaling. Like if you can't just scale up an animal's body size because forces scale differently from geometry, right? So this is why an ant has super skinny legs and can carry 50 times its own weight, but an elephant has huge tree trunk legs. If you had ant-sized legs on an elephant, it would crush its own legs under its weight, right? And so as you scale up a human body, the mass of that body disproportionately weighs on the skeleton, which induces the skeleton to grow more robust, right?
Yeah.
And this guy, Nikolai Valuev, looking at these photos here, this guy is huge.
Yeah.
He's got to be 6.5 feet tall at least, right? And obviously muscular because he's a boxer as well. So if you just are a larger human, chances are you're going to have more robust features in general just because of the weight of your growing body on your own skeleton.
He's 7 foot tall.
Holy shit. Yeah, he's huge. Like, you would expect a 7 foot tall guy to be pretty robustly featured.
Yeah. Apparently he's also a politician now in the Russian Duma. So that's interesting.
Interesting.
I would not like to engage in conversation with them about current world events, I'll put it that way.
No.
Well, I actually didn't take any notes for this show, obviously, because there was nothing to write
down.
I did.
Do we have any? Do you have any notes that we didn't get to yet?
Let's see. We've talked about the procrastination and playing poker and stuff for the dissertation writing that he works in IKEA. About caveman dating, it's 2007. Playing primal grunting while they're playing Wii. Keep your penis in your genus. That's this is like kind of modern techno archaeology. Did you get that they at one point they ask Joel if he's even in the top 8 on FaceSpace of his girlfriend's.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not going to make sense to anyone in Generation Z, is it? But
no.
Back in the day, before Facebook and Twitter kind of took over the social media space, there was also other early forms in the Precambrian of social media where you had Bebo as one, and also MySpace, which really is kind of the one that kicked off the whole sort of social media revolution. And you could create your own MySpace page, and one of the popular things that people did was have a top 8 of their best friends, which you could update according to who'd pissed you off that week or not. And so you really have to have been there in the early 2000s to know what being top 8 on FaceSpace would actually even mean nowadays.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, in the early days of Facebook, you could poke each other.
Yeah.
Yes, they're bringing that back, apparently.
Really?
They're bringing back the poke. Yeah.
Why?
So, I don't know, but all the women out there get prepared to get poked by random men again.
Could you not also super poke? Was that not something as well? I don't know what that meant.
Yeah. It added a super poke, yeah.
In the, the sense of time passing so fast, I deleted my Facebook in 2012, which is amazing because it felt like I was on Facebook forever. And it was like finally like, I've had enough of this. I'm quitting. And that I was on Facebook for 5 years and I've been off of it for 12 years.
Wow.
So it's crazy.
Yeah.
Pull it down.
I joined up when you had to have a university email address. So that was like really early days, 2006. But no, empires crumble to dust. That's the way of the world.
So what are our final thoughts on the Cavemen series?
I think if Nick Kroll did it now, if he wrote it now, it would be really funny. I just think they didn't do enough with it.
Yeah, I think it was okay, but there's nothing that made it different. I mean, they could have swapped the Cavemen for, anyone else. It could have been Brits in America. It could have been whatever. And they didn't really do a very sensitive job of handling the issues that they were trying to handle. I think it could have been done in a better way and also make it so that you're not laughing at the kind of prejudice, but laughing at the people that are prejudicial, something like that.
How about a sitcom set 40,000 years ago where you actually have modern humans and Neanderthals interacting for the first time as a comedy show?
I think that I'd watch that.
Well, we'd have to watch it, wouldn't we? We'd have to review it.
Oh, I guess. I would watch it on my own accord.
But yeah, you'd have to, do they speak the same language? Do we have like kind of classic standard caveman grunting? I think it'd be a hard sell.
Have you seen the Norwegian show Norsemen? It's a parody of the Vikings show.
I have not.
No, I haven't seen it.
Nor have I seen Vikings.
I haven't seen Vikings either. I really like Norsemen, though, because it's set in the Viking Age, but it's got a very sort of dry comedy to it. And everybody speaks in like modern English with modern slang and stuff like that. So it's like this sort of juxtaposition of like a modern show where people are, talking and behaving like we would today, but like just set in the Viking Age. It's all spoken in English. So I really like that style of show. I think that kind of thing is really funny. So just to show the Neanderthals and modern humans all speak English, you don't have to worry about it too much. It's just a stupid comedy. But, you have a group of Neanderthals or a group of modern humans, and then they first interact these other people, and the series is about the, adapting to each other's culture. I think that could be a good show.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. If Nick Kroll is listening, and I'm sure that he is, he'd write that show now.
Yeah.
Before we sign off, we've got another error that was submitted to us from one of our episodes from Sheena. Sheena picked up an error in our Star Trek episode. Ross, it's one for you.
Oh, is it a mistake that I made?
Yes, but it's not an archaeology mistake. It's a Star Trek mistake. You referred to an actor as William Frakes, but in fact, the actor's name is Jonathan Frakes, and the character's name is William Riker. So you combined the two names together.
Okay.
Oh wow, Sheena's on top of it.
Trust the trekkers to come down like a ton of bricks. I'll accept that. That's my bad.
So I sent a T-shirt to Sheena.
Oh, nice
if
one.
If any of the listeners out there have identified any errors that we've made in our podcast, or any factual errors in the movie that we are reviewing, which we didn't catch, that we didn't comment on in our episode, send that to me by email, and I will send you a T-shirt.
Yep.
I think I'm almost out of T-shirts, but I can print up new ones if you have more mistakes.
And Sheena, when you get the shirt, if you take a selfie of you in it, I'll post it on our social media.
Yeah, totally.
And where should she send that photo? What social media are we on? Are you managing the Facebook account, Kim?
poorly. But yes, I do get notifications.
And I manage the Twitter and the Blue Sky accounts, and you can send us an email at screensofthestoneage@gmail.com.
Thanks, Sheena.
If you've been enjoying Screens of the Stone Age, get in touch with us. Follow us on Twitter at SOTSA_podcast and on Facebook at SOTSA podcast, or send us an email to screensofthestoneage@gmail.com. Screens of the Stone Age is supported by the Paleoanthropological Society of Canada. Find out more at pasc-scpa.ca. And before we get into today's episode, I'd just like to give a fuck, I fucked up my joke. I was going to make a joke about a sponsor. What do you say when you're announcing a sponsor? We don't have a sponsor, but I was going to make it a joke.
It's brought to you by Geico.
And now a word from our sponsor.
And now a word from our sponsor, and just be completely quiet for like 30 seconds.
And before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to still don't remember what to say. I wanted to give a word from our sponsor.
Shout out to our sponsor.
You don't shout out to your sponsor though.
Do you?
I don't know. I don't know what you're trying to give.
Or do you shout out to your subscribers? I don't know.
I had a whole joke here, and I should have written a script for myself.
A word from our sponsors?
Yeah. So before we get into the episode, a word from our sponsors. Reset. Before we get into today's episode, fuck, I fucked it up already.
Okay, just take a breath.
And before we get... Okay.